A sitting U.S. senator just accused Congress of weaponizing fraud, and the consequences could hit millions of Americans. Was this really about oversight or about punishment? Claims of hypocrisy, racial targeting, and dismantled watchdogs collided, while billions in aid quietly froze. Names were named, motives were questioned, and one side says the damage is already done. What happened in that room, and why it matters far beyond Minnesota, that's next.
This is Ms. Summerlee from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think like so many people on this committee have already articulated, nobody here believes that rooting out fraud and waste and abuse is not a top priority of this committee, of our caucus, of their conference. It is. If you're on this committee, it is the top charge that we all undertake incredibly seriously. But I think, like so many things with the modern Republican Party, it's like you're skulking right around the edge of things, but too often, your bigotry, the Republican Party's own bigotry, is imprisoning them and keeping them from ever actually doing something that helps, not harms, the American people. And this is another one of those instances, right? When it's a person of color, if it's 2 or 3, it's a pattern, and the entire community must be indicted. But if it's 100 Republicans, it's just not bad. Neither here nor there, because it's important. That's why we have routinely held hearings where we actually go over with the Government Accountability Office their high-risk list. We take it seriously. But the tone of this hearing seems to be a hypocritical witch hunt. It's hard to take it as anything but that, rather than an actual oversight effort. Our federal government currently has the tools to catch and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. It's how the alleged fraud in Minnesota was caught by the Biden administration in the first place. Mr. Ballou, as a former federal prosecutor, you're familiar with some of the tools that we have, correct?
Yes.
Just briefly, could you please verify the following tools for me? Yes or no? Does the Government Accountability Office work to reduce waste, fraud, and abuse?
Yes.
Do inspectors generals work towards these goals?
Absolutely.
What about the Council of the Inspectors General on integrity and efficiency?
Yes.
Are whistleblowers important to rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse?
Absolutely.
Has the Trump administration helped or hurt these tools?
Certainly hurt it by disbanding the Council for Inspectors General and then ultimately firing 19 IGs.
Thank you. That's right. Again and again, Trump has attacked the oversight mechanisms within the federal government. He illegally fired 17 inspectors general and other key personnel. He goes after whistleblowers and he tries to roll back their protections. He routinely ignores the rampant corruption within his own administration. Republicans have turned a blind eye to all of this. They have held no hearings on these actions. And this hearing today isn't even about fraud generally within the federal benefits system, which we would welcome. Republicans have cherry-picked a blue state and an immigrant population, vulnerable, to demonize. To be clear, Minnesota is not the only state with a fraud problem. To truly tackle waste, fraud, and abuse, we need to approach the issue with a scalpel, not a mallet. Discovering that people are committing fraud in the federal program does not mean we should smash the whole thing and end it. It means its oversight mechanisms need to be improved. That's why it's so disappointing to see that the Minnesota House Fraud Prevention Committee that our witness, the Honorable Kristen Robbins, chairs, has issued no reports on these uncovered schemes. It hasn't advanced any legislation to address the issue or even shared whistleblower reports with their Democratic colleagues. They've just held a bunch of hearings and generated headlines, something our committee is all too familiar with. This hearing is not an effort by Republicans to improve social service programs. It's an excuse to end them and to punish Democratic-led states. This has always been the plan. It's why Republicans' so-called big, beautiful bill is estimated to cut more than $1 trillion from Medicaid and CHIP benefits and cut SNAP for 40 million people, the very children or folks with disabilities who were mentioned in the opening statements. Trump has also already taken advantage of the situation in Minnesota. After a YouTuber harassed and posted unsubstantiated claims of fraud against child care centers, HHS froze child care funding to Minnesota, which would affect more than 23,000 children. Just yesterday, Trump also froze approximately $10 billion in funding for programs supporting child care, social services, grants, and cash assistance in not only Minnesota, but in other Democratic-led states of California, Colorado, New York, and Illinois, no matter what party we're elected to, we represent the people of our district, Democrat or Republican. We represent as the federal government all people of all states, irrespective of how they voted. That's the charge that I took, and I would like and hope that you all would do the same. When so many of these social service programs are being gutted and defunded, fraud becomes even more harmful, as that means even less money is going to people who need it. People need these programs. This situation should be an opportunity to take a deep look at the programs and improve their oversight abilities, not an excuse to cut them entirely. If we care about the most vulnerable, if we care about the most marginalized, this is an opportunity to do so, and I welcome us to actually do that one day. Thanks, I yield back.
Ms. Lee, that.
What unfolded in this committee hearing wasn't just another partisan clash. It was a warning shot. A warning about how the word fraud is being used. And more importantly, who pays the price when it is. Representative Summer Lee of Pennsylvania stepped into a room that was supposed to be about accountability. But instead of uncovering wrongdoing, she argued Congress was doing something else entirely, using oversight as a weapon. And the timing matters, because while lawmakers debate fraud on paper, real funding is being frozen in real states, affecting real people right now. This wasn't theater. This was about power, priorities, and who gets protected when systems fail. Here's what actually happened. The committee was convened under the banner of rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in federal benefit programs. On the surface, that's a goal everyone agrees with. Summer Lee acknowledged that immediately. She didn't dispute the importance of oversight. She didn't deny fraud exists. But then she shifted the focus. She argued that the hearing's tone wasn't investigative. It was accusatory. Not broad, not balanced, but narrowly aimed. Minnesota was singled out. An immigrant community was placed under the microscope. And according to Lee, that wasn't accidental. She described what she saw as a familiar pattern. When alleged wrongdoing involves people of color, it becomes a story about entire communities. But when misconduct involves powerful institutions or political allies, it gets minimized or ignored. Then she did something strategic. She walked the committee through the actual tools the federal government already has to fight fraud. The Government Accountability Office, inspectors general, whistleblowers, oversight councils, and she forced a simple acknowledgement. These systems exist. They work. And they were used to uncover fraud in Minnesota in the first place, which raised the obvious question. If the tools worked, why the spectacle? This is where the story deepens. Because while the hearing framed itself as accountability, Lee pointed out what wasn't discussed. There was no serious examination of fraud across all states. No comparative analysis. No systemic reform proposals. Instead, there were headlines. And that matters because oversight can either fix systems or justify dismantling them. Lee highlighted a contradiction rarely mentioned in these debates. Many of the strongest oversight mechanisms were weakened during the Trump administration. Inspectors general were fired. Oversight councils were dismantled. Whistleblower protections were rolled back. And yet, there were no hearings about that. So ask yourself, if the concern is truly fraud, why undermine the very institutions designed to stop it? Lee argued this hearing wasn't about improving programs. It was about creating a narrative that makes cutting them politically acceptable. And that narrative has consequences. Because when fraud becomes the justification, the solution stops being reform and becomes elimination. This is where policy turns personal. Because while Congress debates intentions, funding freezes are already happening. In Minnesota, child care funding was frozen after unverified claims circulated online. More than 23,000 children were put at risk of losing access to care. Then it expanded. Billions of dollars in funding were frozen across multiple Democratic-led states. California, New York, Illinois, Colorado. Not because fraud was proven statewide, but because suspicion became enough. And here's the paradox Lee emphasized. When programs are gutted, fraud doesn't disappear. It becomes more damaging. Less funding means fewer safeguards, fewer inspectors, less oversight. The people hurt first aren't bad actors. They're children, families, people with disabilities. So the stakes aren't abstract. They're immediate. So where does this go from here? Realistically, this debate isn't ending soon. Oversight hearings will continue, funding fights will escalate, and the line between accountability and ideology will remain contested. What changes next depends on whether Congress chooses reform or reduction. One path strengthens watchdogs, improves safeguards, and targets fraud precisely. The other uses fraud as justification to shrink social programs altogether. The next hearings and the legislation that follows will tell us which path lawmakers choose. Summerlee ended with a reminder that cuts don't happen in spreadsheets, they happen in lives. That caring about fraud and caring about vulnerable people are not opposites. And that oversight, when done right, protects programs instead of destroying them. So here's the real question going forward. Is Congress trying to fix broken systems? Or is it using broken systems as an excuse to walk away from them? Let us know what you think.